Banqiao Dam and the Thousand-Year Reign, the hidden disaster of Typhoon Nina. In the early 1950s, the newly formed People's Republic of China set out to reshape the nation with large-scale infrastructure projects. One of the most important was the Banqiao Dam, built in 1952 in Henan Province. It was part of a national strategy to control flooding, generate hydroelectric power, and support agriculture in the Huai River Basin, an area historically plagued by devastating floods. Just 3 years before the dam's construction, in 1949, a major flood had killed thousands and destroyed entire communities. The government, under Mao Zedong, promised such disasters would never happen again. Banqiao was designed to endure what engineers called a thousand-year reign, a storm so rare it was expected to happen only once every 1,000 years. The structure was built with help from Soviet engineers and was considered one of the most advanced dams in China at the time. But 2 decades later, nature would put Banqiao, and the entire region, to the ultimate test. Typhoon Nina. When the sky wouldn't stop. In July 1975, Typhoon Nina formed in the western Pacific and made its way toward China. At first, it didn't appear especially dangerous. But when it collided with a cold air mass over Henan Province, it stalled, unleashing a torrent of rain that lasted for days. Between August 5 and 7, some areas received over 1,600 millimeters of rain, more than a year's worth of rainfall in just 3 days. The soil was already saturated, and rivers began to overflow. Dams throughout the region were under extreme pressure. Upstream from Banqiao, the Shamantan Dam collapsed after being overwhelmed by the rainfall. The floodwaters it released surged downstream, directly hitting Banqiao, which was already filled to capacity. Banqiao had been built for a thousand-year reign, but this was no ordinary storm. Later assessments described it as a 5,000-year event, a freak combination of weather patterns that no one had predicted. At around 1 o'clock a.m. on August 8, 1975, the Banqiao Dam collapsed. An ocean on land. When Banqiao broke, it unleashed 700 million cubic meters of water in just 6 hours. Imagine a wall of water 10 meters high, moving at over 50 kilometers per hour, sweeping through the valley. It obliterated everything in its path: villages, roads, farmlands, and power lines. The initial flood wave covered an area of over 50 kilometers long and 10 kilometers wide. Thousands died in the first hours alone, many in their sleep. Entire towns were wiped off the map. Survivors described the sound of the dam breaking as louder than thunder, followed by a rushing wall of water and then silence. But the disaster didn't stop there. The domino effect. The collapse of Banqiao triggered a chain reaction. In total, 62 dams across the region failed, either because they were already overwhelmed, or because they were struck by the floodwaters from upstream. One of the most significant was the Banqiao Dam. Unlike others, Banqiao didn't collapse on its own. Authorities made the desperate decision to intentionally blow it up, hoping to redirect floodwaters away from major cities like Zhoukou and Xuchang. This strategy, called deliberate flooding, sacrificed rural areas in order to protect more populated urban zones. It worked, but at a tremendous cost. Dozens of villages were submerged. Thousands lost their homes, their livelihoods, and their lives. The human toll. Official numbers were kept secret for years, but estimates suggest that at least 26,000 people died from the immediate flooding. Some reports place the real death toll, when accounting for disease, starvation, and displacement, at over 240,000. More than 10 million people were affected. For many, help didn't come for days. Roads and bridges were gone. Communications were down. Helicopters were used to drop food and supplies, but many isolated communities were left to fend for themselves. The human suffering was immense. But the world didn't hear about it, not then. Censorship and silence. At the time, China was deep in the Cultural Revolution, a period of political turmoil and strict control over information. The Communist Party saw the Banqiao collapse not as a natural disaster, but as a political failure, one that had to be hidden. News of the event was heavily censored. No international aid was requested. No headlines reached foreign media. Survivors were told not to speak. Engineers and officials who had raised earlier warnings were silenced. One of them was Chen Xing, a hydrologist who had helped design the dam system. He had warned for years that the region's dams lacked proper safety measures and that too many were built without adequate planning. For this, he was removed from his post and labeled counter-revolutionary. Decades later, the truth emerges. It wasn't until the 1990s that researchers and journalists began uncovering the full story of Banqiao. As China opened up economically and politically, suppressed reports and survivor testimonies started to surface. Today, the Banqiao Dam disaster is considered one of the deadliest man-made disasters in history. But even now, many official records remain classified, and many Chinese citizens have never heard of it. The scale of the tragedy and the government's response remain a sensitive topic. Lessons from the flood. The collapse of Banqiao was not just a result of extreme weather. It was also the product of engineering overconfidence, political censorship, poor maintenance, and ignored warnings. In an age of climate change, the lessons of Banqiao are more relevant than ever. Infrastructure must be built on science, not pride. Experts must be heard, not silenced. And disasters must be faced with honesty, not hidden behind propaganda. Because history that is buried only waits to repeat itself. If you found this story powerful, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others. Thank you for watching.